Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of Many Tribes, One Kingdom. It's your good friend John, and today we will be taking a look at the book of Exodus. Alright, so if you don't remember, I did summarize the book of Genesis back in January. I do apologize for how long it took this particular video to get out, but we're back to it now. So I'm going to summarize the book of Exodus and talk about its importance for Christians today. Let me just make sure this camera is all good. And there we go. All right. So let's talk about the book of Exodus. As you probably know, it is the second book of the Bible. Of course, maybe you don't know that. I don't want to assume anything. It covers the liberation of Israel from slavery in Egypt and the establishment of God's laws with the people of Israel. It takes place approximately in 1450 BC, and while Genesis was mostly compiled and edited by Moses, at least according to men like Henry Morris, Exodus was fully written by Moses himself. So that's the summary for you, or the introduction for you. All right, let's get into the book itself. So the book opens, and the Pharaoh who knew Joseph, the Pharaoh and his dynasty who knew Joseph, who knew what he had done for the kingdom of Egypt, they have died. They're gone. Israel's descendants have continued to live in Egypt, and they increase in number, but they are enslaved by the Egyptians and their new Pharaoh. Still, they keep growing. So the new Pharaoh orders any Hebrew baby boys to be killed. He orders any boy that is born to be killed in order to stop the Israelites from growing. One woman, a descendant of Levi named Jochebed, and I'm probably mispronouncing that, so please forgive me. She is the wife of Amram. She's able to save her son by placing him in a basket and sending him down the Nile River. This baby boy is found by Pharaoh's daughter, and she names him Moses because of her bringing him out of the water. She raises him amongst the Egyptians, but one day Moses sees an Egyptian viciously beating a Hebrew slave. He kills the slaver, and when this is discovered, he flees into the desert. While in exile, Moses would marry a woman named Zipporah. She is the daughter of the priest Jethro. Together they have a son and name him Gershom. Moses becomes a shepherd for his father-in-law, and it's during this time serving as a shepherd that he sees the famous burning bush. This is where there's a burning bush that is not consumed. God reveals himself to Moses, and despite Moses' many excuses and objections, God actually commissions him to return to Egypt and perform signs and wonders to cause Pharaoh to let the Israelites go. Returning to Egypt with his wife and son, Moses meets up with his brother Aaron and his sister Miriam. What follows is the famous 10 plagues. Pharaoh refuses to let the people go, and so God punishes him. And just as a quick side note, Expedition Bible has done a great video explaining that the Pharaoh of this time is Amenhotep II. So I will highly recommend that you watch it. I won't go into too much detail here, but just know that it's not Ramses II, though many would think it is. The Pharaoh of this time is Amenhotep II. I'll leave a link to their video down in the description. It is believed that each of the 10 plagues targets a specific Egyptian god or gods, and it is showing that Yahweh, the God of Israel, is greater than the pagan gods and their idols. The first plague is the water of the Nile being turned into blood, which is against Hapi, the god of the Nile. And just as a quick side note, I do not speak Egyptian. There is a very good chance I will mispronounce some of these names. If I do, please forgive me. The second is a plague of frogs, which is against Heket, the goddess of birth, who is symbolized with a frog head. Third was a swarm of gnats, which was shown against the god Set. He's the god of the desert. It was to show he had power over creatures like that. Then came swarms of flies against Re, Then comes disease and death on the livestock of Egypt, which is against both Hathor and Apis. Then there's boils against the Egyptians themselves. This is against Sekhmet, Sunu, and Isis, who are the gods or goddesses of pestilence, healing, magic, things like that. Then comes hail, which destroys the plants against, and this shows the weakness of Nut, the sky goddess, and Osiris, the god of fertility. Then after that comes the locusts, and they destroy the rest of the plants. So the crops that the hail left behind, the locusts eat up. And again, this affects Nut and Osiris, as all of Egypt's remaining crops are destroyed. Next comes darkness, which is against the sun god Ra, and most likely the sky god Horus. And the last plague is the death of the firstborn son, which would have shown not only the failure of goddesses like Min and Isis, who were involved with motherhood, fertility, things like that, but also that Pharaoh himself was no god. He was incapable of stopping the plague. He was not a god, though he liked to portray himself as one. It's during this final plague that the Passover is instituted. The Israelites are commanded to kill a lamb, roast and eat it that night, and paint the posts and top of their door with the blood. This marked them as followers of the true God, and he did not kill their sons. With his own son dead and his kingdom decimated, Pharaoh sets Israel free. The journey for the Israelites is not an easy one. First, Pharaoh sends his army after them at the Red Sea. But as we all know the famous story, God divides the waters of the sea for the Israelites. They get to walk through, and then he drowns the Egyptian army. The people also grumbled and complained against Moses for water and food. You'll see this theme a lot. They complain against Moses a lot. So God provides both of these needs. He causes water to come from the rocks, and he rains bread from heaven, which is called manna. They are also attacked by the Amalekites at this time, but God delivers them from this as well. He provides salvation for them at all points, and he brings them to Mount Sinai. Here's where God gives his people the law. Of course, everyone also already knows the famous Ten Commandments, which we've done a video on, and again, I'll leave a link, but they were just the beginning of the law. God also commands Moses to construct the tabernacle, so that he can meet with and dwell with his people. Moses receives the commandments from God on stone tablets. Aaron and his sons, if you remember Aaron, he's the brother of Moses, they are chosen as priests, and Moses is told what clothing to make for them, as well as the incense they'll need to make, and all the implements for the tabernacle. Unfortunately, while Moses was on the mountain, the people did not remain faithful. They asked Aaron to make them an idol, and despite being specifically told not to do this by God, they want it anyway. So Aaron agrees, and he fashions the infamous golden calf and tells them, "This is your God, Israel. He's the one who brought you up out of Egypt, and we're going to worship him." So Moses comes down from the mountain while they're worshiping this idol. In his anger, he throws down the stone tablets God had given him with the law, and he destroys the calf. He grinds it up, and God punishes the people. Many of them die for their idolatry and their sin. However, when Moses asks God to forgive them, he agrees to spare the people. Moses returns to the mountain to rewrite the stone tablets. This time, the people are instructed to create the tabernacle exactly as Moses was told by God. And they do this, and they actually give more than enough, more than what's needed for the creation of the tabernacle. They create the tent itself, the famous Ark of the Covenant, the mercy seat, the altar, the menorah, the showbread table, and all of the many utensils needed for the worship of God. Aaron is to be instituted as the first high priest on God's command, and his sons will follow in his footsteps. Exodus concludes with the indwelling of the tabernacle. After it's completed, God fills it. God comes to dwell amongst his people. So, just like Genesis, Exodus has several major themes. The first is the theme of deliverance and faithfulness. God keeps his promise to Israel and saves them from slavery. He saved Moses, preserving him to lead the people, and he also spares the firstborn sons of all who trust in him. And I find that as a very encouraging thing, even to this day, that we serve the same God who preserves. We can also read about judgment in Exodus. Sin has very real consequences, and because Pharaoh was stubborn and wicked, Egypt was practically ruined. This is interesting because we begin to see the decline of Egypt's dominance in the region after this point. Yes, there were instances of Egypt exerting some power, but the glory days of Egypt were past after the reign of Amenhotep II, after he brought Egypt to destruction. And because they broke God's commandments after receiving them, Israel is also punished as well, which leads to the final theme of Exodus, that of law and constitution. So, you know that every nation has their own type of constitution, their own formalized form of government. And you could say that the Torah, the law, is God giving Israel their constitution in Exodus, which he continues in Leviticus, Numbers, and Deuteronomy. The people are told they will have a special relationship with God, and they must obey what is right. God is going to be amongst his people, and that's why the law needs to be there. God gives the law to protect the people from sin and from themselves, because when let loose, sin can cause very real problems, and so that the world will see his goodness. As always, he is also laying the groundwork for the ministry of Jesus. By presenting the law, God is showing what righteous living ought to look like. The Passover lamb also serves as a type of Christ, and that's a theme we will get into more detail when we summarize the Gospels themselves. That's essentially everything there is for the book of Exodus. Most people only know about maybe the first 20 or so chapters. They know a little bit about later on, but I would highly recommend you go and read the entire book of Exodus. And I would also recommend you check out that video by Expedition Bible. Again, I'll leave a link down in the description so that you can understand who the Pharaoh of the Exodus is and why Amenhotep II is the Pharaoh that was involved in this incident. So I want to thank all of you guys for watching. Have a great day, and God bless you.